Hand looping is the worst mechanic we have in our game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You might argue that something like missing the timing is really bad because it just outright just ruins some cards, or you have something like floodgates that are very oppressive, and a lot of people just don't like this type of card because it shuts down a lot of type of cards or archetypes. But something like Smoke Grenade is just really dominating our format, and even if you take away something like Smoke Grenade, we have stuff like Chaos Dragon Legionnaire, we have Aqua Dolphin. Even at the lower tiers, we have something like Deep Sea Minstrel. We have the Sky Scourge combo that is really good with Torn Scale coming out in Phantom Rage. And then we have something like Gust Kraken that just came off the ban list for some crazy reason, and it also hand loops you. But what if I told you hand looping has always been in the game since even the DM days?
I choose to play the spell card, Confiscation.
Hand looping has always been a issue in Yu-Gi-Oh! We had cards like Confiscation, Forceful Century, Delinquent Duo, Chaos Emperor Dragon with the Yada Lock, which was pretty insane, and a bunch of other different cards that were crazy in the format. And a lot of people forget that hand looping has always been a problem, especially Konami has forgotten that hand looping is just not fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! We even had a point in time where people were quitting the game because hand looping was just too powerful. We had Crush Card Virus that was really good in the format, and only a little bit of people had access to this card, and it was just really not good for the format. You had something like Dad that was really powerful in the format as well. So having something like Crush Card and Dad being in the same format, it was just really insane. And if you look at all of these different hand looping cards, they were often on the ban list, countless times, and then we finally had all of them banned at a certain point. But then we had something like the Wind Up Loop that was very notorious for its hand looping, with Wind Up Hunter being able to summon it multiple times, hand loop multiple times. And then we have something like the Gust Kraken that was immediately hit on the ban list. Emergency hit, by the way, because this card was just so broken, and hand looping was so easy with this deck because the deck was super consistent. And you had so many other different cards that hand loop but wasn't really like a core strategy. You had Moon Glacier in the past that was really problematic as well. It's problematic right now, but not really many people are talking about it. You have Erebus that was problematic. Even as a card in general and as a deck, Monarchs was just really strong, but Erebus was a hand looping card as well. We had something like Dark Law. When you added a card from your deck to your hand, you get to randomly banish a card from your opponent's hand, which was pretty problematic on top of Macrocosmos effect that it had. And then you had something like Trevor, which you can Trevor loop over and over and over, hand loop a card from your opponents over and over. So that was really problematic as well. And then we had something like recently, which is Topologic Gumblar Dragon, which was, such a problematic card, not because it was such a broken card that it needed to be banned, but hand looping in general is just not fun to play with. And speaking of, hand looping over and over again, we had something like Omega that was, pretty problematic in the format somewhat because you had this existing deck that wasn't really good, but if you faced against this deck and you didn't have any hand traps, you were getting hand looped for like 5 or 6 cards because you didn't have any hand traps, you didn't prepare for it, and they just got lucky and won the die roll and had, the perfect hand. So having these hand looping cards is just not really good in the format, and it's been complained about over and over again. But will Konami really do anything about these hand looping cards? I think not. There's been a lot of, different hand looping cards that have been coming out in recent years. They haven't been really good, but just speaking of one card that's super new that's hand looping is the Gigabyte, the Possessed Awakening card, whatever it's called. That card hand loops, but it's just not good. They keep printing these new hand looping cards. You have something like the Cataclysmic, which is discard a random card from your opponent's hand. You have something random like Dynamis Rex that also hand loops from your opponent. And then you have, these other new cards that are just really problematic. You have something like Minstrel that is not really seeing play in the format because Mermails are just not that good in this format right now. But Minstrel and, Moon Glacier, they can be a combination of why the format will be not really good in the future, because we have a lot of these really semi or bad cards that are hand looping that are not really good right now. But if the stars align in a certain way where this deck might be really good in the future, oh, hand looping is back in the format again. Oh my god, we're gonna have to complain about another hand looping card and we're going to have to ban it again. But the reason why I started this video is because a lot of these different water cards hand loop. If you look at something like Aqua Dolphin, it hand loops. If you look at something like Deep Sea Minstrel or the Deep Sea archetype in general, they all hand loop. If you look at the Spiritual Water Art Iowa, whatever it's called, that also hand loops. So all of these different water cards are hand looping. And if you notice, the other cards that I talk about in this video is the Cataclysmic card, the water one. I'm not going to pronounce it. But it also hand loops and it's a water card. So all of these different water cards are just really good or really known for hand looping. And if you've seen in the recent poll that Konami is hosting, the Creator Card poll, a lot of people didn't like Mermails on the list because they were hand looping. And people just don't like hand looping. And people expected, Mermails, a notorious deck in something like 2013, in the Zexal format to be, one of the biggest decks of the era, and people just didn't like the deck or didn't want to vote for the deck just because the deck hand loop. And it's just really, really sad to see something like that happen. So let me know what you guys think about this topic or, hand looping in general, because I feel like it's a really big problem that Konami has not been fixing. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Peace. Make sure you like and subscribe.